Hi, I'm Jeff from HereForTheGear.com. Are you looking to upgrade or replace your AV receiver, your surround sound receiver that is? Well, if you are, you've come to the right place. I've got a list of some of the best that 2018 has to offer, and some of these have just come out as of this month. So make sure you click like and subscribe to this channel because I've got a lot more videos coming up. And let's get to the list. Thanks a lot. The number 8 slot on the list goes to the Pioneer VSX832. This is a pretty cool little receiver, 80 watts per channel, 5.1 channels only. I mean, this has no Zone 2, it only has a single subwoofer output. It's got 4 HDMI inputs and a single HDMI output. Now, they're all HDCP 2.2 compliant, which is really nice, so you do have that ability. And it does have a USB input on the front, so if you wanted to plug in a stick that has MP3s on it, or if you had any kind of video files on there, you could plug those in and view those as well. So it's not bad for a starter out receiver. It's really nice. Now, if you did want to bump it up a little bit, Pioneer just released a VSX933, which actually has 6 HDMI inputs, 1 output, and it's a 7.1 surround sound receiver, and it has Zone 2 outputs as well. And it's got the integrated Sonos controller, if you're familiar with that. I'm not sure if you are or not, which the Sonos system is the multi-room audio system. I'm going to do a future video about that system as well, which it's a pretty nice system also. I've got a link to that receiver in here as well. The number 7 spot on the list is the Sony STRDH550. This receiver has been going loud and proud for many years. You know, when you make something good, there's no reason to change it, right? It runs 90 watts per channel, 5.1 channels, 4 HDMI inputs, and 1 single output. Very handy having the USB on the front, playing media off it like the MP3s and videos like the Pioneer, and also for firmware updates. I've had to do that with some receivers in the past. Keep in mind, you will have to have it hooked up to the television to do this. You're almost always going to have to do that. Aside from the HDMI inputs, it does not have many more inputs besides that, so don't be expecting to hook up component devices like Laserdisc players to this or anything else. You're pretty much limited to a couple of RCA inputs, a digital coax, and 2 fiber optics. That's really about all you're going to have with this one. It's pretty basic, but it's still not a bad receiver. At the number 6 position is the Yamaha RX-A780. It might be your prescription of choice. At 95 watts per channel, 2 channels driven, 7.2 channels which can be tweaked in a 5.2 configuration, then use the other 2 channels for Atmos front height, your back, or if you want to bi-amp, you can even do that. 5 HDMI inputs, 2 HDMI outputs, Zone 2 for audio. All the ports are HDCP 2.2 compliant, by the way. It's also compatible with their MusicCast system, so you could run your rear speakers wirelessly if you wanted to, as long as they're the MusicCast speakers, which I provided a link to as well. At number 5 is the Denon AVR3500X. This is a pretty sweet 7.2 receiver indeed, with a nice amount of power and a lot of HDMI ports, not to mention component in case you need those as well for the old Laserdisc player. I remember breaking one of those discs when I was a kid. They were about 75 bucks a piece. You don't want to do that. It has 2 channels driven, 105 watts per channel, so that's a pretty good rating actually. 7.2 channels, which you can assign as you please. It also has RCA inputs in case you want to use the unit as preamp. It has 8 HDMI inputs, 3 HDMI outputs. 1 of those can be used as a second zone. This would coincide with your assignment for the speakers. The other 2 are in case you wanted to simply power 2 televisions with the same source, or if you wanted to use a television and a projector kind of together. It also has Wi-Fi and hardware Ethernet connection, and this way if you wanted to tap in and use the Denon HEOS system, which is their proprietary wireless audio system, in case you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like the Sonos system. And it's loaded with features also. Really a pretty cool system. So it's a really nice receiver. Number 4 on the list is the Onkyo TX-RZ810 7.2 channel AV receiver. This receiver was a very flexible one to work with as far as connections went. Let's start with power. It pushes 130 watts per channel on 2 channels driven, so we're climbing up the chain here in power now. It actually runs 9.2 channels. It has a set of channels in the back. Aside from the first 7, you dedicate height or biamp. This will allow you Atmos setup or to biamp your front towers. You then just have to go into the receiver settings and select the ones you have made. It has H8DMI outputs, however only 3 are HDCP 2.2 compliant. This is the only complaint I had with the receiver at this price point. Still not bad though. The Yamaha RX-A3080 is number 3 on the list. We are now getting into a lot of channels. This Hummer is a 9.2 channel receiver, but it has the ability to process up to 11.2 channels. Wow. In short, it has 2 XLR outputs on the back you could run 2 cables out of to a small external amp and power 2 additional channels, which if you had larger mains that needed more power, this would be ideal. But it's still a powerful receiver. 165 watts on 2 channels driven is pretty good. 8 HDMI inputs, all HDCP 2.2 compliant, so you have a ton of inputs on this thing. 2 HDMI outputs, it has Ethernet and Wi-Fi connectivity. It also has HDR10 and Dolby Vision capabilities. So, I mean, this is a really nice receiver. The Marantz SR8012 is second to the top of the list. This thing is beautiful not only with features and performance, but with the way it looks. The letters SR in its model number reminds me of the old top secret SR71 Blackbird spy plane. It still is a pleasure to look at. So let's crack the secrets on this baby. This beast isn't at number 1, but it's the most powerful on the list, pushing 205 watts per channel at 2 channels driven. It runs 11.2 channels, so you can run a full 7.2 Dolby Atmos system with no sweat. Or if you didn't mind losing your rear heights, you could biamp the fronts and still be at 9.2.2. It supports DTS:X and Aura 3D codecs as well. This unit also supports the HEOS interface, so if you want to interact with the Wi-Fi speakers on their HEOS system, you can use those as well. You can also use the Marantz app. It has simply too many features to mention. I mean, this receiver is just awesome. Okay, so now to the number 1 position on the list, the Denon AVR-X8500H. This thing has more channels than you will know what to do with. Oh wait, we're audiophiles. If you're like me, we'll find a use for every one of them. This is a 13.2 channel receiver. One thing to mention though, it actually has 15 outputs, so if your room is geared for both Atmos and Aura 3D, this unit can switch back and forth depending on the mode you're listening in. Pretty convenient. However, it's only able to implement up to 13 outputs at once, which is all it needs to use. Really, the combinations of speaker connections you could use with this thing is insane. You could do a 7.1 channel at ear level, the front channels biamped, and still have enough connections to run your 4 Atmos overheads. That is just crazy. It's a slight step down in power at 150 watts per channels driven. It has 8 HDMI inputs total, including the front one, all HDCP 2.2 compliant. It has 3 HDMI outputs. Using Wi-Fi or its LAN abilities, it uses the Denon HEOS wireless music system. You can also play media directly off USB devices with the USB ports. If you're going to go large scale, it's a really cool receiver. And keep in mind, this monster weighs in at 51 pounds, so you're probably going to need a friend or a pallet jack to move this mother around. But boy, it is a cool receiver.